We're the Valadrians from Portland, Oregon, and like many people recently, we've been greatly affected by all the imagery that's been coming in from Syria and the Middle East.
It's embarrassing to admit it, but this sort of reality doesn't really sink in until you see yourself and your family reflected in those pictures. So we decided to try and do something to help. The method that we tried is to speak directly with people that are dealing with the crisis in one way or another.
And our idea is to try to avoid all the biases that come from the news and the social media, and to really find a way to act right here and right now and help as much as we can locally.
And we'd like to share our findings in hopes that maybe somebody else like us are in the same sort of dilemma, trying to figure out how to help. And so that's what this video is all about.
That's where we begin.
What we've learned is that even when looking at it from the surface, it is very clear that this is an overwhelmingly huge tragedy.
And independently from where we stand on our political views, and despite the oversimplification of the crisis by news outlets and social media, the hard facts still remain.
More than half of the entire Syrian population of 22 million have been displaced due to the ongoing conflict. There are over 4 million Syrians that have fled the country. That is roughly the entire population of Oregon.
Another 7.6 million have been displaced internally and are still trying to survive within Syria. And of the total 11.6 million, half are children.
And for the Syrians fleeing, just finding a welcoming camp in hopes to attain a refugee status is an incredibly arduous and perilous journey. This, on top of being forced to pack up their entire lives in a bag, desperately seeking safety for their loved ones.
For those lucky enough to find a shelter, finding permanent resettlement is becoming harder and harder every day.
Resettlement to countries like the US, for instance, accounts for less than half of 1% of the world's refugee population.
We had the opportunity to talk with Javier Alvarez, who is the Director of Strategic Response and the Global Emergency Team from Mercy Corps, who just returned from dealing with the crisis in Greece, one of the main receiving ports for Syrian refugees.
Civil society, getting to know what these refugees are like, demystifying, that these refugees are all carrying guns. That's not true, I think this needs to be talked about it, and Mercy Corps, we can certainly influence this dialogue, but it needs to be talked about it. I think we need to walk away from the cliches and the sort of the only focusing on the negative, right?
We also spoke with Lila Piazza, whose family still remains in Syria, from whom we learned that most refugees do not want to leave Syria, and many are working to rebuild so that they may return. And she had an important piece of advice for those trying to learn more about the conflict.
I would say, first of all, find Syrian people in your area and talk to them. There are Syrian churches in almost every major city in the United States. I mean, there are people all over the place that are Syrian people. When you go to a Middle Eastern restaurant, find out if the people are Syrian and ask them about the war. Ask them what their family's experience is. Ask them if they know what's going on and what their opinion is, and find out what the actual Syrian people feel about the war and what they feel can do to help.
So if you want to help, you can help with either immediate needs or long-term solutions. And we found organizations that help both locally and globally that you can support. For immediate needs, we recommend the Migrant Offshore Aid Station, which is a fleet of rescue boats that help migrants lost at sea, Shelterbox, which provides emergency shelter and supplies for families in need, and Hand in Hand for Syria, which helps people stay in Syria instead of having to flee. If you want to support a larger organization, we recommend Mercy Corps, which provides direct aid to Syrian refugees, Oxfam, which helps the refugees in Lebanon and Jordan, and UNICEF, which focuses on children, nutrition, and healthcare.
If you want to help on long-term solutions, you can start by signing a petition, or directly writing to your state representative in Congress to work on legislation that promotes and enhances refugee resettlement programs.
You can also volunteer to help the organizations that resettle the few refugees that make it to Portland. We had the opportunity to speak with Catholic Charities, one of the 3 organizations that coordinates the resettlement efforts locally. And what we learned is that this critical work is done by very few with little resources and under very strict government scrutiny. You can learn how to support them here.
Here's the takeaway. If you can help, money is a much better alternative than goods. The reason being that the cost of processing, transportation, and distribution can easily offset the value of material donations.
If you can, volunteer, fundraise, engage politically, or support the local refugee resettlement efforts.
And lastly, make a habit to have meaningful and constructive conversations about world affairs, and make an effort to find accurate and unbiased sources of information.
Because having the many privileges we enjoy as a first world nation plays a significant part in the development of many of these conflicts, and it is our responsibility to do more to prevent them.